This is the Job Stories Podcast, how people find work that matters.
To get us started, if you don't mind, do you care to just introduce yourself, and then what is your job now? What do you do?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Chris Turley. I'm the founder of a company called ProScout Business Development. I'm formerly a recovering engineer and a recovering commercial banker, and took my layoff check from the bank that I worked for close to 6 years and started this company February 12th of 2014 at 5 a.m.
Cool. And
So,
that's great. That's great. And what do
yeah,
y'all do? What's kind of the idea behind this company that you've started?
yeah, at the end of the day, what we really like to do is we like to work with people that are either trying to expand into new business through either acquisition or through going direct to end users. So at the end of the day, we are, I hate to use the word outsourced, but a lot of times I would consider ourselves to be outsourced slash supplemental business development for mid-market companies looking to grow.
Yeah. Cool. So you made the little joke. Of course, I know you pretty well, so I've heard this before, but you're a recovering engineer. So you've got a tech and banking background, but now you're in this industry of this company that you founded that's very business development, sales related. So you're kind of a unicorn in the sense that kind of what we see in the market. Like you can kind of do a lot of the real relational stuff, but also you have this like banking and tech background. So where did it start for you? Like what was your path? Like take me back to like college. What did you think you were going to do in your career from back then?
I think for me, it's just like thinking through past makes me just kind of just think about, my goodness, where did I come from, where I'm going, exactly what you're talking about. And I think really what the root of is for me is that, I can get very technical if I need to, but I really like to be more relational than technical. And that's where I think that, like you were alluding to earlier, being able to have a hybrid of technical and relational is good, especially when you're trying to work with companies that sell bigger ticket items. So that's an area that, to me, marketing, is really encumbering a lot of different things to help you build a brand. What you really need to be thinking about behind that brand awareness is what I consider to be relationship building, right? Marketing generates leads. ProScout helps develop long-term, valuable, sustainable relationships. And that's the piece that really drives me and gets me excited, is watching these relationships turn into good, solid, not only a lot of times friendships like with what you and I built, but also working on valuable opportunities to generate ROI.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about too. I love that. And tell me more, I want to get into kind of how you discovered this highly relational, because I know you really well, and that is who you are, like how you discovered kind of that about yourself and took that leap to start ProScout. But let's back up one step. You mentioned that you were in the banking world, but left there and you took your severance there. Tell me more about that story. What was that? What was that like?
Yeah, what was really interesting is I learned out in my engineering days, I could be very technical, but I did a lot better job as opposed to fixing the equipment. I did a lot better job of actually fixing a lot of times the client, in terms of being able to help them solve problems, put together, items that would kind of help build out a fully implemented program that's going to be good for their overall growth and development of the organization. Took a jump into banking, which let me focus more on the relational piece. But what's interesting about banking is that you've got credit and you've got relationships. Again, that's where I realized early on I could do the credit piece of it, but I didn't really enjoy it because it was very technical. I enjoy the relational aspects of being able to develop long-term relationships to where when people do have a need, you're able to connect the dots and put two and two together and generate a good long-term relationship.
Yeah. So when you were at the banking world or even prior to that, did you have someone that was kind of encouraging you and saying like, hey man, you're really relational. You might consider doing this one day. Did you have a mentor that kind of led you on the path you're on now? How did that work out?
Yeah, I've been very, very fortunate. There was somebody that told me a long, long time ago, it's Turley, you're not the sharpest tool in the shed, but you're coachable. I've kind of thought about that a lot over my life and in my career. And what is good is that a lot of people are very, very book smart, and I think that's a great thing. But sometimes it's being able to take the book smart and apply it to real life applications. I'm more of an application kind of person, is what I learned. And I think that, I've had several mentors that have been really close to me kind of growing up, not only professionally, but also personally. And that's what they've kind of charged me to do is like get in there and dive into what you're passionate about. And to me, my passion is people. And then you can always kind of backfill the rest. You know what I mean? Um,
Yes.
you can always learn more about the actual product or service. A lot of times it's all about dealing with somebody like, and trust. And that's kind of been the root of, my foundation, not only professionally, but also personally.
Man, that's awesome. I love that. So you had somebody that told you that you maybe weren't the smartest, but you're coachable. So do you take that into account when you have been building ProScout? Do you look for people with that same kind of like coachability? Like maybe they don't have everything I need right now, but if we wait 6 months, I bet you I can coach them. Do you kind of view hiring for ProScout in that way as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that hiring at the very root of what it is, and I've learned this the hard way, is that I think all of us over the courses of our careers have made good hiring decisions. We've made great hiring decisions, and sometimes it's like that didn't really work out as well as I'd hoped it would. Um, the foundation of the hiring process is integral in especially in this business. I always want to find people that people know, like, and most importantly, trust. I can teach them the rest. There's a friend of mine that worked for a small company you may have heard of by the name of Chick-fil-A.
Mm.
He worked on the leadership team there. And one of the most interesting things about what he told me a long time ago is that if you come to our campus, which he's taken me to many times, you're never going to see anybody on this campus that's going to be an A minus or less. Everybody here is going to be an A plus.
Mm.
It's amazing. And that's what they hire for. They said, we can teach you any job in this organization, typically within a couple of months.
That's
They want the passion. They want the passion.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think that we need more like you out there because that's what we see a lot is there may be some skill gaps in resumes, and we hear CEOs on this podcast talk about it all the time. But there are instances where hiring managers will see skill gaps in resumes where maybe they're like a 60% fit for the job per the requirements. But they're candidates that we've talked to or whatever, and we're like, yeah, but they'd probably be a great culture fit. So it's really good to hear you say that, and I love that piece. Like you can really coach anything. People need to know, like, and trust them. I really appreciate that sentiment, and I'm curious too. Do you take that mentality from the folks that spoke into you in the banking world? Is that where that comes from? You think?
Absolutely. It's really interesting as you look over the course of your career. Like we're kind of going through a little bit of a rebranding. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 9 years. It'll be 9 years this coming February, and you just have to find ways to reinvent yourself over the years. But the core, of what ProScout is and what we do stays the same. And that's the piece that inspiration and motivation and all the things that people coached me on early in the days have stuck with me to keep us on the right trajectory. Um, Mentors are imperative in your life and in your career. It's just make sure that you're very selective about who you pick.
Mm.
Sometimes there are good people that are driven by sometimes perhaps the wrong things.
Mm.
And sometimes you can get caught up in that piece of it to where it's like you're chasing after the wrong things or things that are important to somebody else that aren't important to you. That's where I think you have to have some sense of introspect to find what really is my passion. Some people it's money, some people it's time, some people it's travel, some people it's just being able to get up there and tell somebody I'm successful. I think being able to dive into what's important to you is integral to how you want to select people that are going to be influential in your life. You want to see congruence in those.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. I do think that I've heard that this idea on this podcast that like when you're younger and you're making career decisions, most of the time it's money. And I'd be lying if I said for our business that's not something we talk about and think about quite a bit. But there's also this aspect that as we get older, it's like, yeah, but I also like to spend more time with my family. I also like to work with people that I like. Is that something that you kind of found as well for your life?
Yeah, that was one of my mentors going back when I first started at the bank. He told me the very first day I started, he said, Chris, if you're doing it right in this business, you're going to not be looking for money. You're going to be looking to have a surplus of time.
Mm.
A lot of times, if you're doing it, and now again, this is my opinion, but in the wrong way, I think is that you've got a surplus of money, but you don't have a surplus of time. You're always finding ways to be able to make more money to buy more time. If you find ways to be able to have a surplus of time, you can always turn another buck if you're doing the right things. Time, I think, is truly the most valuable.
That is so cool. Yeah, you're messing up if you're making more money but losing time. I love that sentiment. That's cool. Have you always felt like too within your life? Have you always felt like you've had some like risk taking characteristics? Because starting your own business after, I know you were able to take a severance package, which you probably, who knows, like you probably wish it was more, but still, like you took a big risk. Like, are you from an entrepreneurial family, or I always like to talk about people how they mitigate risk.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I actually come from an accountant and I come from a school teacher. So on a risk scale, like I love my parents, but on a risk perspective, I always look at any decisions I've been making for this company on a scale of 1 to 10. Like where my parents would want to be like around a 1 to 2, I feel like I've always tried to operate at the very highest level, somewhere around a 3 to 4. Now, there's sometimes that, within the business, as you're growing and scaling it, you've got this when you first start. You've got these big, tall, steep waves.
Hmm.
Now it's more of like a wave like this where you're still going to have to ride the ups and downs, but you've got to be really, really careful. And I think it's really important. Like one of the most interesting things about my layoff check, and I'm always the first to tell people my layoff check was $10,000.
Hmm.
So needless to say, that wasn't a whole lot to start this company with, but it's
Yeah.
lasted me 9 years.
Yeah.
You got to ride the ups and downs, but just make sure that, on that risk scale, like when you really feel in your own heart, like I'm getting towards like a 7 or 8, you really need to be thinking about it. And I think another thing, just real quickly, that this other mentor told me as well early on in the career that ties into this is that you can't look at your business in hours, weeks, and months. At the end of the day, you need to look at it at the end of the year. Did we turn a profit? Because you're always going to experience this. So if you get to the end of the year and you're showing a deficit, it's like, oh, maybe we ought to be thinking about something else.
Hmm.
But if you rode the ups and downs and you come out at the end of the year, everybody's happy, everybody's been paid accordingly, and you feel like you've got a little upside, keep pushing forward. But always be tuned into that risk scale.
Yeah, man, that's so great. I talk about this a lot, but it is those ups and downs from an entrepreneurial standpoint. That's pretty gnarly to handle sometimes. Whenever the waves were bigger, to use your language, I really like that. What helped you through like the low ends of that? Like I mean, did you just say, well, I just need to buckle down and work harder? Or, or is it just a laser vision on the passion? You knew that you wanted to do this. I don't mean to lead the witness, but I'm just curious.
No, I think that, brings up a couple of really valid points. I think in my case, I've had several job offers over my career with ProScout. And what really has happened is I think a lot of times it's a test. I've had a couple of job offers that literally my eyes fall out of my head. It's like, whoa, that sounds really, really good.
Yeah.
But then my response always is, why would I want to come do this and work solely for you when I can continue to do it for other people, provide you with value and do it at the capacity we need and still accomplish your tasks. And that's where they say, check.
Mm.
All I was trying to do is figure out how committed you are to your own company. And if you feel strong enough to be committed to your own company, at the end of the day, that ties back to the banking world, which is credit. So 5 C's of credit: character, capacity, capital, collateral, conditions. When you're operating your business, at the end of the day, it all goes back to character. You're going to ride these ups and downs, but when things get tough, how are you going to react? Are you just going to give up, or are you going to stand up and say, this is my business. I've got to have accountability for it and grab it and make it happen. Sometimes I think you can't ignore, like, this isn't going well, like I'm going to have to go and find something else. But I think with my business, when you get to those bottoms, you always have to be thinking about the next peak. And it's really hard to do it in the moment, but you just have to be patient with it. And that's, I think, the hardest piece of what it is I do every day is gaining more patience.
That is so good. I love that. I think my dad used to say all the time, his quote was like, you can really tell like a person's character by how they handle adversity. And that's exactly what you're speaking to right there. I love that so much. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that piece. Turley, we're kind of getting towards the end. I wanted, though, for real quickly, if there's anyone hearing this that might want to reach out to either work with ProScout or wants to maybe even submit a resume, they're like, hey, I actually want to work for this team. How can folks get a hold of you if they want to?
And a lot of people laugh at me because it's like they say that I'm one of the few people on the planet that actually like to pick up the phone. So it's one of those that you can always reach me on my cell phone. And that phone is always on, and it's always available. And I think one thing that I really want to convey to people, it's really interesting that a lot of these problems in people's business, and when I say problems, trying to get from point A to point B, a lot of times they're not technical problems, they're just business problems. And it's one of those, being able to be there as a resource for people to help them work through things that perhaps people like you and I have already worked through in the past to help them get from point A to point B. I don't need to just talk to people just about business development. People that just have general questions like trying to get from point A to point B outside of business development, just feel free to call me and pick up the phone and let's just chat for a few minutes. People like you, Mason, and Matthew, you guys, part of the reason why I love having a relationship with you guys, we can just talk life and we can just talk business. A lot of times people get so hung up in the technicalities that you miss the boat on, this is a business problem, not a technical problem. Mm-hmm. So that stuff, I'd be happy to be a resource. You can also find us on the web at ProScout Business Development. Just do a Google search for that and you'll find us, and reach out in any way. And I'll call, email, text.
Perfect. And I'll make sure we do a link for maybe your LinkedIn too, or ProScout's LinkedIn, or both. So we'll throw that in there too. Cool. This has been awesome. Thank you, Turley. You're great. I'll actually see you later today. So
a pleasure.
It's always fun to hang out. Appreciate you, man. It's been great. Have a good day, man. We'll see you.
You too. See you guys.
Bye.